With the power of on-chain data, we have the ability to truly trace all of the activities that take place on a blockchain. This data can bring a lot of benefits depending on the context and specifics of the operation. In the most common cases, it can be used to track the specifics of tokens flowing from selected wallets and platforms. This was especially seen during the whole Luna and FTX situations where you could see the catastrophe happening on-chain. And we've also previously looked into these on-chain statistics when we deep dove Quant Network and LCX. Today, we're going to be doing an updated review on some on-chain transactions with Quant's QNT token that all have some very strange coincidences and relations to them. As we know with Quant's tokenomics of a tokenized license on Overledger, in addition to all of the other service fees of Overledger, there's tons of potential cases for how these may be tying into utility of the QNT token. I'm Tokenicer, and I'm here to bring you guys in-depth research and analysis from the digital asset space, along with covering the progressive tokenization of the world. Be sure to check out Tokenicer.network for all my other content platforms directly in one spot. From my Twitter threads, Spotify podcasts, Medium articles, interviews, and much more. Now, before we continue any further, I've just got to remind you guys that nothing you ever get from me will be any form of financial or investment advice. But with that said, let's dive right down the rabbit hole. So when we last touched on the QNT transactions, we discussed on how there were repetitive transactions all from the same wallets being distributed into these other wallets with matching amounts. Well, since then, there's been some more of these occurrences with some changes to the pre-existing ones. We can see that in the top 29th 32 spot, these wallets are all holding the exact same amount of QNT tokens, being 51,378. So in total, there's 205,512 QNT between these wallets. And when we look a little deeper into these wallets, what do you notice? Every single one of these wallets were funded very similarly. And so when we backtrack a little, we can actually see that this was all done in one batch transaction. Here's the transaction hash, and well, when we break down this transaction, it was sent on December 30th, 2022 from Coinbase 10, which is a smart contract wallet. And well, when we actually break down this batch transaction, we can see everything that happened. As we can see, everything in here can pretty much be marked up as largely retail transactions. There's a few USDT transactions totaling up to a few $100s, and one USDT transaction of about 6.6K, with a few other SHIB transactions down here that can also be pretty much marked up as retail amounts, right? But then we get to these QNT wallets. Do you notice anything interesting or kind of standing out about them? Well, for starters, these transactions are much larger than the previous USDT and SHIB transactions we saw above. In fact, it's quite interesting to see how all these transactions match up perfectly, right? They're all sending the exact same amounts. And well, if you're already thinking that's pretty crazy, take a look at these ones below. Same thing, just at a much larger scale. Well, besides this one transaction, though I think we can come to a general consensus that this one isn't really a retail transaction either. But everything else here matches exactly. They all got a transfer of 12,844 QNT, and that's exactly what we see when we look at how these identical wallets had gotten funded. So this is quite some unique behavior, right? This batch transaction is pretty much made up of entirely retail transactions of altcoins. But then every single QNT transaction is here, you could argue has to be an enterprise or institution given the total value of them. So what's really going on here? We've previously dug down this rabbit hole before to look at some wallets that also had this sort of repetition and matching amounts to them. And just like the ones before, these wallets just get QNT from Coinbase withdrawals, and they never sell or move the QNT anywhere. There's not even any ETH to do so. So it really makes you think, who could be accumulating all this QNT? And keep in mind, this isn't like a small scaled amount. We also see these 5 wallets here that are all again holding the exact same amount. This time it's 12,844. So quite a bit less than the 51,378 QNT wallets we were just looking at. But if you may remember, we were just talking about the number 12,844 in the wallets with 51,000 QNT. That's because the large batch transactions we saw had all those wallets get an inflow transaction from Coinbase of exactly 12,844. And so when we look into these specific wallets with the 12,844, these wallets had gotten the funding from Coinbase 10 on the exact same day and pretty much the same time frame, just a few minutes apart from the other transaction we were just talking about. But regardless, this is showing that a lot of QNT had left Coinbase within those few minutes. So when we look into this specific transaction hash, we can see there's a little more variety in this batch transaction. So last time, it literally seemed like everything in that batch transaction was just retail movements aside from the QNT, right? This time we see again pretty similar thing from the top down. We see nothing but QNT transactions in these large enterprise or institutional amounts. But once we get down here, we also see a few other larger transactions from different altcoins. Not quite as large or even close to the QNT ones, but we see a 40,000 USDT transfer. I guess you could argue that could also still be a retail wallet. And then a transfer for Ocean Protocol token worth $27,000. And then just about everything else of value in here are, of course, QNT transactions, with the large majority of these being worth exactly 12,844 QNT each. So I decided to take a look into each of these specific wallets to see if it was the same behavior through and through. And this is when things started to get really weird. So when we look into this batch transaction and the respective wallets that the QNT went into, we see that unlike all the wallets we've seen before, these guys actually sent all of their QNT away. And when we line these up together, we see another thing that really stands out. Not only did they all send their QNT out, they each sent it all to different wallets. Well, almost all of them. As we can see here, there are a few that just kept the QNT in their wallets and are still holding it to this day. But for the majority of these, they all sent it to different wallets around the same time between March and May, with many of these sending within March 12th to March 18th. Why that day? I'm not too sure myself. But after this, the next obvious thing to do was to check the wallets they sent it to, right? And this is where the trails kind of end, and it's definitely one that leaves a lot more information to be desired. So when we check the wallets that got the secondary transfer out of Coinbase, these guys actually all sent it right back to Coinbase 10, and they did so pretty much right after they got these transfers from the initial wallets. And so it really leaves you wondering, what is going on? So this means that there were two batch transactions of various withdrawals of 12,844 QNT to all these wallets. We can see that there were a total of 344,092 QNT that was sent out just between these two batch transactions, with approximately a few minutes apart. That's roughly 2.3% of the total supply of QNT that got sent out between two wallets. From the same Coinbase wallet, they had sent out 2.3% of the total QNT supply. So what we have right now is that on December 30th, 2022, between 11:02 and 11:16 p.m., there were two transactions that consisted of 344,092 QNT. With transaction 1, we can see that each of these wallets are unique, and for the most part, they all got that matching 12,844 QNT, and two transactions that were smaller around the 2,000 range. But that's not quite the case with the wallets distributed to in transaction number 2. As we can see here, there were 6 wallets that transaction 2 distributed to, and within the single batch transaction, there were multiple wallets that got 2 to 3 fills of QNT. Meaning these wallets got deposits from Coinbase 10 multiple times in one transaction. And then again, a few small outliers of 2,000s and one 13,000 transaction, which still got added to one of the repeating wallets. When we check all the wallets that got the QNT, they can be sorted into a few categories. Some of these got the QNT with this being the only transaction in their wallet, while here we see that some of these wallets that had gotten the transaction had previously already been getting QNT from Coinbase all the way back to well over a year ago. And then of course there's this strange category where they send the QNT to another wallet that happened to send it right back to Coinbase 10. So really a lot to think about here in regards to this behavior. 1. Why are these wallets holding up so much QNT and seemingly doing nothing with it? 2. Who could these entities be? We know it's likely not retail given the massive amounts in value. And 3, for the ones that send the QNT to another wallet and then back to Coinbase 10, what's the purpose of all that for? From what I'm seeing, there was actually a form of organization to this. With the first transaction, we can see all the wallets are pretty much brand new wallets, and that one QNT transaction is the only thing that's in that wallet. Whereas the second transaction pretty much only sent QNT to wallets that had already been accumulating QNT from Coinbase starting in 2021. For now, I don't have a clear answer to what this could possibly mean, but make what you will out of this. So now let's line up all of the respective wallets that did have some interaction with Coinbase that are currently holding their QNT. There's 4 wallets with 51,378 QNT. These wallets all got their first QNT deposit in August 2021 and also got the recent 12,844 deposit on December 30th, 2022. Then there's 5 wallets with 12,844 QNT here, where the only transaction they have in here is from that batch transaction itself from December. We also see 9 wallets here with 10,176 QNT. With these ones, we can tell there's definitely a lot more matching entities here, but they weren't a part of the wallets that got the recent batch transaction. And they got their first bits of QNT from Coinbase around the same time as the 51,378 wallets in August of 2021. There's 5 here in the group of 9,970, and they pretty much follow the same rule. They didn't get the most recent deposit, but their most recent one was a little under a year before that in January 2022. And they also began getting QNT from Coinbase in August of 2021. Then there's 8 wallets holding 9,635 QNT here that, again, are in the same category we just mentioned. Most recent deposit from January 2022, with the accumulation starting way back in August 2021. We see 5 wallets here with 6,668 QNT, and while these guys also started the same way that we've been mentioning, with the initial deposit in August 2021, they actually stopped getting QNT with their final deposit back in November 23rd, 2021. So a little bit shorter of a time span. And just under that, there's 4 wallets with 6,512 QNT. Same thing as above, began in August 2021 and ended in November 2021. Now notice how with a lot of these wallets, we're starting to see the day they began to get QNT became later and later in August. We initially saw some of these get the deposit really early on in August, but with these, we're seeing some of them start towards the end of the month. Right under that, we then see 3 wallets with just a little less than these 6,512 we just saw, with these guys all holding 6,505 QNT. And you guessed it, exact same behavior again. Starts in August and ends in November, all in 2021. Then between the 267 to 274th ranks, there were 8 wallets that are holding 5,936 QNT, with again the same activity, though these guys actually got their first deposit just a little later in early September, but still getting their last deposit in November 2021. So we're noticing there was a lot of activity back in 2021 starting in August and ending in November. But the interesting thing is, since then, they've done nothing with the QNT and it just keeps sitting in these wallets. And lastly, we'll cover the 3000s range. And let's just say there's quite a few of these guys. Starting off with the 3,588 QNT wallets, there's 11 of these guys. And we can notice that they seem to be a little bit shorter in duration than the other guys we've been covering. For a lot of these wallets, they started getting the QNT in September, some even in October. But pretty much all of their transactions end on October 12 at exactly 5:30 p.m. in 2021. And I'm talking about down to the exact second. So quite interesting how that all lines up regardless of the fact that they began getting deposits on different days. Right below these are the guys with 3,585 QNT. There's 5 of these, and again, very similar stuff. But with these guys, they seem like they all actually started and got their initial deposit at relatively the same time on September 14th, 2021, around 8:19 p.m. And just like before, they all stopped getting transactions since then at the exact same time on September 29th at 11:40 p.m. So it really gets you thinking and realizing that there is indeed some link between them. And then there's a batch of 3 wallets holding 3,584 QNT. Notice how the increments of these wallets are now moving by 1 rather than what we saw before where there was a group of 51,000 and the next group was all the way down at 12,000. And these follow the exact same behavior we've been seeing just on different days. We also see the same thing here with a 3 set of 3,853 QNT. Same amount of wallets as the 3,854 ones. Believe it or not, there's actually quite a few others of these guys. You can see here with multiple matching wallets all around relatively the same range. So I'm not going to fully cover these as it's more or less the same as what we've been talking about. Though just to break it down for you guys, here's the remaining matching wallets. There's 4 3,852 wallets, a whopping 14 3,851 wallets, 7 wallets with 3,579, 9 wallets with 3,576, and finally 4 wallets with 3,470. So when we add all of the amounts of these matching wallets up, we now get 746,976 QNT. That pretty much rounds up all of the current matching QNT wallets in the top 500 spots. And as you guys can see from the slides I've been showing, that there seems to be a reason all of these wallets have matching amounts. They all seem to get the same transactional amounts, of course all from Coinbase, and it just so happens that all the respective matching entities seem to stop getting transactions or get their final transaction all at the exact same time. Needless to say, that is a very large amount of the total pie. So let me know what you guys think. This is of course some very strange behavior, and of course it's not the first time we've seen this with the QNT token. I've previously done other coverages on this, but we had to get an updated one given that we haven't seen any of these wallets send the QNT right back to Coinbase until now, which again only recently began happening in the start of May this year, 2023. Not only did we count up the amounts of matching wallets here, but we also learned that many of the respective matching wallets all stopped getting deposits at the same time. And the fact that the overwhelming majority of these wallets all began around August or September of 2021. It'll be interesting to see what happens, and we'll have to closely monitor these wallets to keep tracking what's going on. If you guys enjoyed this analysis, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to help with the algorithm while turning that ringer on to get the latest, most in-depth updates on the digital asset space. And while you're at it, don't forget to check out Tokenicer.network for all my content platforms in one spot. From my Twitter threads, Medium articles, Spotify podcasts, YouTube videos, interviews, and so much more. As always, that'll be right down in the description below. But that's about all I've got for you guys today. As usual, be sure to stay safe and keep learning, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.